Chapter 1 June 13th, 2033 Greater Seattle Area, Washington, USA 92 degrees Fahrenheit 0601 hours. The buzz of my alarm clock tore me from my nightmare. I was screaming, thrashing in the bed. I stopped and clarity slowly returned, until a headache snuck up and clubbed me from behind. I squeezed my eyes shut and moaned through the pain. Fucking alarm. Ugh. Did you shit in my mouth, Spike? I carefully cracked an eye, looking straight at my cat. He turned his dour gaze on me, then looked away. Deliberate haughtiness in every movement. Buster, a barrel of a bulldog, chuffed with laughter. Then he loosed a far less pleasant sound. His fart was rank and pushed me over the edge. I threw the sweat-soaked blanket aside and bolted to the bathroom. Bile rose up my throat as I fumbled with the toilet lid. I had it open just in time. Puke sprayed across the porcelain and into the water. Blues and greens and purples, with the occasional flash of orange surfacing for a moment. My skin prickled with sweat. I sat back and heaved a sigh of relief. Then the alarm blared again. I snatched it off the bathroom counter and viciously stabbed the first button I could. Nothing happened. I took a breath, then carefully found the off button and pressed it, causing it to fall silent. I ran an internal audit. Obviously, I had too much to drink the night before. I felt like hell. My head was hosting a competition between a speed metal concert and a rave. My joints ached. I blamed my friends. Going out on a Sunday night might not have been a stupid idea, per se, but it hadn't worked out for me this time. I preferred dark beers, not hangover-inducing sugar-laden death traps. I climbed to my feet, feeling the hangover shakes set in. My limbs were jelly. I brushed the curtains aside and turned the shower on and set it to hot. I wanted to sear the alcohol out of my pores. Buster flopped his fat ass in the doorway, huffing. He was an English bulldog and basically a big round cuddlebug. But he could clear a room with a maniacal gleam in his little eyes. Then Spike strode right over Buster and into the shower. Linda, one of my co-workers, had suggested I adopt a puppy to have someone happy to see me when I came home. I protested, saying I already had a cat. She stared at me and repeated, "Happy to see me." I thought Spike showed love in his own way, but he was a cat. I stepped into the shower and immediately grabbed the body wash. I scrubbed away, trying to remove the stench of alcohol and bile. After I felt clean, I stepped out of the shower and toweled off. Once I was dry, I grabbed my electric razor. I shaved my stubble down so I looked clean and presentable. I almost felt human again. I left the bathroom and started to get dressed. I donned the black slacks and a simple white button-up. Then I turned to my tie collection. Corporate policy demanded a tie. My favorite was a horrendous tie-dye piece with polka dots. It caused nausea in sober people. Hunter S. Thompson would have been proud. I diverted through the kitchen to leave food for my furry children, then headed to the garage. I quickly did the traditional pocket pat, wallet, keys, phone. Then I ducked into the car. Then I shut the door and pressed the start button. It asked for authorization. "Dante DeWeiser," I replied. It chirped, then the engine growled to life, and I told it to start for work. The car backed up, clearing the garage. I pressed the button above the center console to close the door. My car paused for a moment, then rolled smoothly onto the street, bumping from sidewalk to roadway. The drive was normal, 40 minutes of boredom and checking various social media as the car drove into the city. Then an ancient silver Honda blew past me on the exit ramp I needed, careening out of control. They slammed side-on into the retaining wall, plastic and metal screeching across concrete, trailing showers of dirt and sparks. They disappeared around the corner and I let loose a groan. A moment later, I heard a massive crash, followed by another, then something like an explosion. "Fuck me, of course," I grumbled. Then I navigated through a few options on the car's infotainment center and dialed up my boss, Jessie. It was a few minutes to 8, so she sent me to voicemail. "Hey Jess, I know you don't want to hear this, but some fucking idiot went and tried to kill himself on the highway. Just jammed up the exit to our street. I know I'm going to be late. I'll send pictures when I get closer." I hung up, resigned to my fate. Traffic was always a bitch, even with self-driving cars. I hated being late, too. This would make the third time in 3 months, which means Jessie would have to have an official talk with me. She was going to hate me for that. Time slowed to a crawl. The morning was already sweltering, and the sunlight was blazing down the glass valleys of the buildings on all sides. The streets were lit as if the sun was directly overhead. Out of curiosity, I poked at the infotainment center in the dash to check on the weather. 98 degrees and rising. Projected to be nearly 117 degrees in the afternoon. Record-breaking hot for Seattle, and this was the 3rd month in a row. I leaned back and stared into the sky. A few lazy clouds drifted by. The car in front of me moved, and I switched to manual control and squeezed forward. This finally brought the accident into view. I came to a slow stop, nearly bumper to bumper with the car in front. The sight was amazing in its stupidity. The idiot had crashed into another car, this one black. I couldn't tell the model from where I sat. The rear end of the black car was joined to the Honda, and the front end was lifted up with water spraying out from under. A fire hydrant was spewing water all over the sidewalk. The black car was all the way across the oncoming lane, with the Honda blocking the lane I was in. Nobody would be moving for a while. I bet the idiot that had been speeding would end up paying for the water too, and at drought rates. He would definitely get dropped by his insurance. If he even had any. He was driving an ancient car that couldn't even be autopiloted. A cop was already on scene, sweating in the early morning heat. Traffic was backed up in both directions, now causing the freeway to slow down to a crawl as people rubbernecked, trying to see what was causing the backup at the off-ramp. I groaned again. A fire truck rounded the far corner of the street, coming directly at the accident. Their response was so quick, I figured the cop must have already been present when the accident occurred. Imagine that, a cop when you actually need one. The fire truck slammed to a stop, and a bunch of guys in full gear jumped off. They ran to the cop first, as I suddenly realized he was injured. He must have been in the black car. A closer look showed that the car had antennae on the crushed trunk and roof. That was not lucky for the speeder. I thought ahead. First, they would have to get a tow truck to haul the Honda out of the way. Then they would have to remove the busted police car. After that, they would have to find the main shutoff for the block to fix the hydrant. This was going to take a while. I set the car back to auto, but shut it off to save fuel. Then I cranked back and looked up through the skylight. Weirdly, the sky looked darker than it had the last time I looked up. The tint on the sunroof wasn't what was making everything look dark. The sky itself was darker. Maybe some storm clouds were building nearby. Out of sight.